All right, Jeff, we got lots of sports to talk about. This man is being honored next Wednesday, January 21st, by the Philadelphia Sports Writers Association at their banquet with the Bill Campbell Award. Host of Sports Center, friend of the show, Kevin Negandhi. Welcome back, man.
Hey guys, how we doing? Looking forward to next week and coming back home in the area, and it's just to be mentioned in the same breath as the late great legend that is Bill Campbell. It's such an honor.
Talk to us about that. I mean, Jeff and I have been to the event for years. It's a great opportunity to celebrate the work that the writers and reporters do in the area. You're going to join people like Rob Thompson, Fran McCaffrey being honored this year, the Sixers team from 25 years ago. What's it like for you to get this recognition for the work that you do?
Oh, it's pretty humbling, and I don't use that sentence lightly, considering that, as a kid that obviously my brother always describes it that whenever we would be around and I'd be quiet, he'd look over and I'd have the Philadelphia Daily News open and I'm the back page pouring through, and how I grew up and my connection with my father. I was always reading the Philadelphia Inquirer and the sports section next to the comics in the morning so I could inform him watching football games on Sunday. So the shape of my mind and how I process things when it comes to Philadelphia sports was put together by the writers and the voices in that market, especially in the 80s and early 90s. So to be around those guys and understand the legacy that they've carried on in that market, because, writing is a lost art, especially when you look around and you see where newspapers are right now, what online is and where people get their information. They just go to social media and they read, 140 characters, and then they come to some conclusion instead of actually understanding what a columnist is there for, or somebody on the beat who's there every day. So I respect and love it. When I got to Temple, before I even did anything with radio or TV, I was like, I got to learn how to write. So I worked at the Temple News, and I was the sports editor there. So I was, covering John Chaney in these news conferences when Kansas came to town or Duke came to town. I'd look around, I'd be like, oh, there's Mike Kern, there's Dick Girardi. There's a handful of guys that I looked up to. There's Bill Lyon. Oh my God, Bill Lyon's here, So I understand it. And I appreciate it from a different point of view. And it'll be a really special night on Wednesday with my family in attendance.
It sounds like from an early age you knew that you wanted to do this. What made you decide that you wanted to be the guy covering sports instead of the guy playing sports?
Because I couldn't play. I knew my limitations by the time I was 14, 15 years old. Yeah, we all have these dreams and aspirations of, I could be the next, Michael Jack Schmidt. And, we play these scenarios in our head. I would always have like a basketball net downstairs, a mini hoop in my basement. My mom would, come downstairs and she's like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, all I'm hearing is for the last hour, like this conversation. And I'm like, I'm doing play-by-play of these games. I'm playing against myself. Like we have imaginary teams. And she's like, but aren't you like wasting your energy? And I'm like, no, if you don't have play-by-play, then the game doesn't count. Those were the early beginnings of understanding where my mind kind of processed being at a sporting event and why it was essential. And we had a big wiffle ball league in my neighborhood, and I had like I created like this small newspaper. We would have stats of what everybody was doing. So that was the framework of this person that I am today, of understanding stats and understanding that the role of telling a story and sitting down with my father and explaining why Ron Jaworski shouldn't be blamed for that interception. Don't get mad at Dick Vermeil. It was informing a public that really wasn't about facts. It was about emotion. My father was very passionate about Philadelphia sports, so it gave me the space to say, wow, I can kind of educate this guy as he yells at the screen. And I took great pride in that and saying, why do you think they did that? What are the tendencies? And then to be able to do that, I've always said that when I'm on the air, especially representing Philadelphia and my family on SportsCenter, or whether it's college football, whether it's the NFL, whether it's any type of show, the NBA draft, I am the fan through and through, but it gives me the opportunity to be the informed fan, to present why this is happening and facts to back it up. And I take great pride in that while discussing things and holding things, at a level of, I understand what you're going through at home, why you feel that way, but let's explain why this is a big deal. Perfect example. We did something about Anthony Davis yesterday. Obviously he's going to be out. Doesn't need surgery, but potentially out 4 to 6 weeks. And Shams Charania is reporting it. And I told our researcher, I said, it's really important that we have a graphic on the back end to show what Luka's done, as well as Anthony Davis, because no matter what, the fan is always going to go back to that trade. So fair or not, anytime you mention Anthony Davis and injuries and his Mavericks career, you're going to think about what could have been, what was, and now Luka's doing this now with the Lakers. So it's important that while you have an update on Anthony Davis, we do an update on what Luka's done so far with the Lakers. And my researcher came back and he was like, actually, it's a good point, because Anthony Davis has played, I think he mentioned I want to say 26 games or some number it was, or it was some number that he brought up, but he was like, Luka doubled that. Luka's doubled the output of games with the Lakers. And I was like, that's what the fan wants to know, because let's make it easier for them that they have access to this information immediately when they hear a story. What's next? The play calling for Jalen Hurts, which is a big deal. How many play callers has he had? Let's give context. 5 now. This will be his 5th one since he became the starter in 2021 with the Eagles. So we're providing context after the Kevin Patullo firing that I think is really essential for the fans. So they have information, and then they have backed up information why this happened.
Well, because you're the informed fan and you're the person that informs us of things, we're going to give you the opportunity that we don't give a lot of people, because we usually don't take call-ins. You're going to be Kevin from Phoenixville, and we're going to give you the chance to go around the horn and talk about the subjects you want to talk to, and you can say whatever you want.
I just think, question, right? we'll go with recent events, right? Like with what happened with the Eagles. That's the most recent one. It's been under 72 hours of them falling short in the first round, the wild card, a team that has a Super Bowl champion defense. It's just frustrating that you see all this talent that Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie have put together, and they can't figure it out. They can't find a way on this offensive side. Listen, nationally, I think from the 30,000-foot view, everybody's like, well, shouldn't you be happy you won a Super Bowl? I've explained this to multiple people, especially guys at my pod, when we get ready for SportsCenter. I'm like, I've got like a Falcons fan, I've got a Chargers fan, I've got a Patriots fan, I've got a handful of different guys. And I've explained, and they're like, aren't you happy? And I'm like, it's really hard to be happy because we have this Super Bowl window, right? And the most frustrating part of this Eagles team is you have the Super Bowl window, and I use that as an example, like the Lions thought they'd be back when they were a couple years ago, almost knocking on the door, right? And look how far they've gotten. They didn't even make the playoffs. They've fallen from this category of, hey, we're dominant in the NFC. Look where the Chiefs are right now. Look where the Ravens are right now. Look at where the Bengals are right now. The Bills, they survived, but a lot of people were counting them out against the Jacksonville Jaguars because they go on the road. This window to win is so small. The 49ers went through that you have 3 to 4 years. That's how the NFL shaped with this cap. So the frustrating part for, I think, anybody that follows the Eagles is every single week watching this team was so excruciating because you know the talent, and they never played 4 quarters of good offensive football. And that's, I think, what drove everybody crazy. That you're knocking at the door. You have this phenomenal defense. If you're just playing decent offensive football for 4 quarters, you're going to win. And I think that for them not to figure it out, and with Nick Sirianni, you come back to this one question: what does he do well? If he's the type of guy that's overseeing things as a CEO a couple years ago, where Howie and Jeffrey Lurie almost tandem and said, hey, we're going to bring in Kellen Moore, we're going to bring in Vic Fangio, you just oversee the team as a CEO. This team fell apart once again, and you see a ton of finger pointing. You're going to see a lot of the narrative come out with Jalen Hurts. You're going to see a lot of unhappy A.J. Brown. Like, your job is to oversee this locker room emotionally and understand it and stick to your guns and not cave in on some things. And this offense just doesn't have any schematic advantage. And Nick Sirianni's an offensive guy. I think that's what drives everybody that follows the Eagles team as a fan crazy, because you're knocking at the door. You have so much talent. They shouldn't be home watching football this weekend.
That's the thing. It was disappointing, but not surprising. It was the same issues that they had all season long, that the coach kept preaching tough, detailed together, while the team kept committing penalties, kept getting to the line late where they couldn't make adjustments. You kept seeing things leak out of the building of who's responsible, who's not. So if we make you not Kevin from Phoenixville, but Coach Kevin or owner Kevin or GM Kevin, what do you look for? Do you look for an offensive coordinator? You mentioned Jalen's had 5 in 5 years. Do you look for an older guy like a Frank Reich who's going to be here, not looking for another coaching job? Do you look for a younger guy? What do you look for to try to fix this?
It's a really good question. I think they hit it out of the park with Fangio because he's not leaving. This is ultimately where he wants to be. The problem is that if you want to get somebody of high quality that understands that Jeffrey Lurie, it's very important to the front office to be cutting edge on offense. You need to have creativity. I don't mind the idea of, hey, you get an OC that can actually be here for a year, and if he gets a job, that means he's successful, right? And that means, like, okay, that's okay if somebody leaves. That means, like, we either were in the Super Bowl or we won the Super Bowl. That's been the trend, right? So to me, right, it's Mike McDaniel, Cliff Kingsbury. It's I've seen like Todd Monken's name being mentioned, Greg Roman, Stefanski. You know what you're getting? You're getting experienced play callers. You need experienced play callers. The Patullo thing, and I know the story's coming out that it's not always his fault. Okay, well, then it falls on Nick Sirianni because that was his guy. They're running all the similar concepts in a Sirianni type of offense. Kellen Moore 2 years ago ran Sirianni's offense, but one thing Kellen Moore knew a rhythm. And if you watch this Eagles team, the most frustrating part was on offense, they never had any rhythm. Everything was late, right? Getting to the line, last second, like you mentioned. They don't have time to make adjustments. And I have a theory about that. And you're sitting there and you're like, but listen, the coach is there. They're going to blame the quarterback. I'm sure we've seen stuff come out. There's certain things he can and can't do. It's the coach's job, though, to make that player better. That's why you're there, right? They're not getting rid of Jalen Hurts. Have you seen what the money would be like if they were? I don't think they're doing that, especially over the next year or two. So you've got to figure it out and make it work instead of saying, no, run our offense and we're going to be stubborn. Now, at the same time, I don't think Jalen Hurts is exempt of blame. We didn't see him run. And when this offense really moves is their dynamic quarterback runs a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm not saying run 15 times. But at least the idea of running with the football 8 to 10 times and opens things up. Now, a little bit different, too, this year. Juergens was a shell of any type of guy that we've seen over the last 2 years. Dickerson wasn't right since August, and Steen's not Mekhi Becton. He's not big enough to play that guard play that they want, the physical idea of the tush push, and that's why they abandoned it. I would say it felt like they abandoned it in November when it wasn't working anymore. So they've got to get the offensive line right because that was the greatest strength of a year ago, and it changed how they wanted to do literally every single thing. And I'll add one other thing. We're having a different conversation if A.J. Brown has better effort in blocking and attempting to make catches on Sunday. They're playing the next round. Now, the next round would be excruciating going to Chicago because we're all like, ugh. But A.J. Brown let, I think, this team down among a lot of other things, and we'll see if that's addressed considering the cap hit that's going to be potentially if they were to part ways.
Yeah, that's the question: is what do you do with somebody like A.J. Brown? You have the head coach coming back, you have the same quarterback coming back. Can A.J. Brown coexist with them? And if he can't, the suffering from a financial standpoint is bad.
Yes, but I will tell you this. Howie has showed us in the past, they have tried to make it work with a star like Carson Wentz. And Carson, they tried. Carson called them out, wanted them to make some changes. They made some changes, and Carson still said, I'm not coming back. You got rid of the coach I wanted to get rid of, but I'm still not coming back. And they said, okay, well, we just can't have you around. We have to move forward. We'll take, I mean, I think at the time it was like a $33 million cap hit. It was the largest one at the time. And it was like, oh my God, the Eagles are, and now it's completely different. Like we've seen cap hits. I mean, the Russell Wilson cap hit was so ridiculous. So I think this cap hit will be brutal, but I think Howie will be like, I tried. We've got to, let's wait till the June 1st deadline, and then we'll find a way to move them and recoup something and get a better, healthier locker room and guys that are actually going to fight for balls. So Jalen doesn't feel like he can't throw the football to him because they're not going to get the result that they want.
I feel like we'll be talking about this all off season. I want to move on to college football playoff because I feel like every time I turn on my TV, I see Kevin Negandhi telling me and breaking it down for me. Getting ready for the final Monday night with Miami and Indiana. Your thoughts on that game and what we've seen overall so far in the playoffs this year?
Indiana's a juggernaut. And who would have ever thought we'd say that in the college football space? But Curt Cignetti has done an incredible job. Listen, all these programs spend money on NIL. They all do. We all know it. But if you target a certain group and bring in a certain type of player that highlights what you want, that is, hey, we're going to be efficient, we're going to be smart, we're going to dominate, we're not going to make mistakes. And that's what Cignetti's hit on. He has brought in guys that are hungry, that don't make mistakes, and they have 45 guys on their roster that are 4-year or more players. 4-year or more. And when I say 4-year or more, it's because of the COVID year, right? And then potentially redshirting. So some of these guys are 23, 24 years old, and they hit differently than an 18 and 19-year-old. And they're much more mature. And a lot of people will be like, well, it's the BYU model. Well, BYU model to a certain extent, we've seen BYU do that through the years. Curt Cignetti's a different one, man. He makes sure these guys don't make mistakes, man, and that you're going to make the mistake first. No matter how much talent you have, you're going to blink first. We're going to capitalize. Other side, Miami and Cristobal, it's the identity that he's always wanted. We're going to win through the line, offense and defensive line. He's got, Reuben Bain and Mesidor on the ends for Miami who are going to hear their names called in 99 days in the NFL draft because they are phenomenal players. Carson Beck came there for a reason, right? And the one thing that you saw at the back end of the season is this team didn't really, especially in the beginning of the playoffs, they didn't really trust Carson Beck. They said Mark Fletcher's our running back. Malachi Tony's our guy that can make a lot of plays as a Swiss Army knife, coming out of the backfield also as a wide receiver. So we're going to utilize those guys and put them in open space. When they had to make a play late in that game against Ole Miss, Carson Beck said, I'll do it. Get on my back. I'll carry you. And that was the difference. Can Carson Beck play a game against an Indiana team that forces you to make mistakes? Can he have a clean game, especially in the second half? That's going to be a huge question mark. And then can Bain and Mesidor apply any pressure to Mendoza? Because Francisco Mendoza is the real deal. Everything you see about him, potential number 1 pick by the Raiders, Heisman winner. He's just so smart. He does everything right. They have 3 fantastic wide receivers that can make catches everywhere. And Mendoza always puts it in the catch radius in the right spot away from the defender. So I think this game, it's an 8.5 spread, 8.5 points. I think this game's going to be closer than that. And I think it's going to come down to the fourth quarter and which quarterback can make 2 or 3 throws, which team makes the mistake at the end, which kicker potentially misses, a 45-yarder. I think that plays all a role in a game like this. So I would take Indiana, but I would think it's going to be closer than, how Vegas views it as an 8.5 point spread.
There's so many things to talk about with college football and things that need to be fixed. But on a week like this, when you're covering the national championship, how exciting is it for you?
It's great because, again, there's so many storylines. Like, Mendoza coming back. He grew up less than a mile away from, where the stadium is. I mean, the campuses of the University of Miami, his family, what they've gone through. He gets to come home. Miami had the chance to Cristobal went to the same high school as Mendoza's father. They went to high school together. So Miami had the chance to bring in Mendoza. He was interested in coming back home. They chose Carson Beck. They chose a guy that felt like he was pushed out by Georgia. I think there's a handful of storylines of Indiana potentially win their first national title. And I mean, 2 years ago, before Signetti, it was the losingest program in the history of the sport. And now they could close out one of the greatest seasons ever undefeated. And Miami potentially win their sixth national championship, and to do it on their home field. I think that there's so many great stories on the field. Outside of it, the sport is a mess as they try to figure out the wild, wild west with potentially expansion to, 16 to 24 teams, NIL, and the coaches leaving early, the transfer portal, and the window being, I think, way too early in the year. I think that stuff has to be figured out, and hopefully, leadership comes through. Unfortunately, we're not getting it right now from the NCAA. That has to play a role. But on the field, it's amazing. Every single one of these games, the storylines have been tremendous. All I ask for, all I hope to get is a really good game. Because we've got that in the semifinal. We got that in the quarterfinal. But every game that Indiana's involved, I mean, we already know the outcome. They dominated Alabama. They dominated Oregon. But these other games have been tremendous. Let's just hope that we get a close one. That's all I want. All I want is if we've got a close one at halftime, we've got some intrigue coming into the fourth quarter, and we get to see the best players actually step up and no one else on the outside. No, blatant, calls that you're making, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I don't want the ref to decide this. I want the players and the coaching to decide the outcome of who's the national champ.
Does Indiana give a Temple alum hope?
Yeah. You know who gives Temple alums hope?
Casey Keeler,
the head coach.
Yeah.
And Casey's very much like Kurt Signetti. He knows who he is. He's an old school guy. He understands basically the big picture of the modern college football game, and he targets guys that he thinks are going to have an impact. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but for the audience, like Trinidad Chambliss, the quarterback at Ole Miss, who was at Ferris State last year, he was basically about to commit to Temple. Last April, the Temple football staff reached out to me, Casey, and they're like, hey, we've got this kid named Trinidad Chambliss on our radar, mobile quarterback. Can you reach out to him? And here's his number, his information. I was like, yeah, great. I had everything lined up. I was about to give him a call the next morning. That night, Ole Miss signed him. That kid went to Ole Miss as a backup because Ole Miss had the money. He went to the SEC. And then, in week 3, Austin Simmons goes down, and Trinidad Chambliss is one of the great storylines in all of college football, and he takes his team to the semifinal and almost to the national championship. So the one thing that I quickly understood as I saw Ole Miss's season play out, and I actually had the chance to share the story with Trinidad in October when I interviewed him, I was blown away how Casey can identify talent and understands impact players. And when you have a coach like that, especially with the movement of the transfer portal and NIL, and you can make immediate makeovers of your roster, and you have to be able to identify talent immediately and not so much develop talent, I was blown away how good Casey is in doing something like that. So it gives me hope. Where Temple is right now, where Temple is in the American, how that team was, if they beat Navy, they're playing in a bowl game, and a Navy team that finished 11-2 and won their bowl game. If they beat Navy, they hold on to that win. It's a completely different trajectory of where this team is. So I think that Temple's on the right track because they have the right coaching staff and understanding the NIL space. And I'm pretty excited about what they've put together in this portal window, which ends tomorrow.
We talked to Coach Keeler earlier this year, and we both came away with the same thought. We looked at each other and go, if we had kids that were playing college football, he's the guy you'd want to play for.
Yeah, if I could play, I would love to be sitting in his office. But I joked the only time I'd get in his office was when we were doing an interview with him. So, I mean, he's just yeah, he's spectacular.
He's the real deal.
He is.
And listen, backstory real quick, too. If you guys are comparing Indiana, Kurt Signetti in his press conference, very famous, of course, where he sat down at Indiana. He's like, Google me when people are like trying to understand who he was. Because all he does is win. If you look at Casey's track record, where he was at Delaware, what he did at Rowan, what he did at Houston State, all he does is win. And that is so important in instilling that winning mindset. It is, we live in a fantasy football world where it's like, oh, let's just move this transaction and that transaction, and Stats. But you still ultimately have to have a DNA of understanding how to win, and Casey does.
We talk about the run that Signetti's on. I got to talk about the run that Kevin Negandhi's on for my last one. You want to talk about a whirlwind? 50 states in 50 days, the draft at Lambeau, home run derby, the NBA draft lottery. I got to throw in the Rubik's Cube World Championship. You covered the Little League for the 6th time in 7 years. You did the Rose Bowl parade. And the coolest one to me, as somebody who's visited Field of Dreams when I worked out there, you had a catch with your son at Field of Dreams. Obviously, you need a nap. But how much fun are you having doing all of this?
Well, it was a phenomenal 2025 run. I'll tell you that. God bless my wife, because there was a lot of things that we were doing. But here's what I told my wife. And by the way, I'd like to add a couple of other things. Coached my one boy in Little League. Coached both of them together in Cooperstown in August. Coached my middle one to a flag football championship as well. So
even more important than any of the other stuff you did.
Yes. So I say all this to you guys because it's really important that, while they were asking me, hey, the 50 Days in 50 States project, incredible endeavor by ESPN to do it 2 decades after the original. Oh, my boss sat down with me and was like, hey, these are the options. What do you want to do? And I picked the Rubik's Cube because of my middle son. And I was like, it's the summertime. I was lucky to go to 7 states. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm taking them to 2 or 3 of these. This is like, we're at a point in my career that and my kids are 13, 11, and 9. They should enjoy this with us. They should enjoy what I see. Now, granted, I'm not taking them on the set, but they should see why daddy's on the road. They should see, and get the chance to see what this whole thing is like, because I may never get these opportunities again. And so when they look back, it's like, hey, it was pretty cool together, right? So it was really important to me that, being able to take them to, the Rubik's Cube and, obviously the All-Star game in Atlanta. But the Field of Dreams, all of us had to go. I wanted all of us to go to Iowa. My 2 boys didn't understand. My daughter had to play, so she stayed back home with my wife. But I told my 11 and 13-year-olds who love baseball, we watched Field of Dreams the week before we went out there. I said, it's important you watch all this. And when we went out there, I don't know, guys, it was hard to describe. It was magical. And we were there in the morning coming out with the fog, but we also knew that rain was coming. And we were trying to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to end the show. And literally 10 minutes before the end of the show, the entire sky opens up and basically dumps so much water, and it's just us 3 left. Everybody had left except my camera crew and me and my 2 boys. And I just told them, my one son was like, Dad, it's pouring, and we're under a tent. And I'm like, we're going to do this. I said, you'll trust me. We're going to do this. You'll understand. And we went out there and had the catch, and they were drenched. I was drenched. Everybody talked about it afterwards. And over the 3 to 4 weeks afterwards, to have so many fathers come up to me randomly in airports, stopping me in Cooperstown, stopping me, on the street, my kids are around, and them sharing what they felt and how they saw it. It allowed my kids, my 2 boys, to understand this was a big deal, Dad. I'm like, you have no idea. And
that was
when
my
you get
reaction.
Older and you have kids,
that was my reaction.
You
having worked in Iowa and in at Field of Dreams and played there a little bit, I would kill to be able to have my kids out there to have a catch. I just thought that was the coolest thing.
It was, and I was really lucky to have it. And it'll be a moment I'll have with them for the rest of my life. And I think as you get older, you look at, accomplishments are one thing. You look at moments, right? What are the moments, the core memories that you could pass on with your kids when they reflect back? And that's all I want. I want reflective moments. In the middle of all this, you had mentioned the NBA draft. You had mentioned, the NFL draft. In the middle of all that, my father had passed away in India. And, he lived an incredible life. And I look back, and as a kid, I look at the moments I had with him. And it was really important, especially this year, to have these connective moments with my 3 kids, that when they get older, when life just sweeps you away with all the busyness, that they'll be like, man, that was pretty damn cool. And I got pictures and video to show with it. And, I had so much fun with my parents. And so I appreciate you bringing up this year. Yeah, a lot of frequent flyer miles, and me talking to my wife saying, trust me, I'm going to be home. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. And I say all that as I get ready to go this weekend to the national championship.
Did you say you also coached in Cooperstown?
I did. Yeah.
So as a dad who also did that, kids learn a lot from their parents. And you talked about the field of dreams and how, you said to your kids, someday you'll understand. Did you learn anything? Because as a coach in a barracks in Cooperstown, you're the fly on the wall. You get to see these kids grow up. Did you have those moments where you now sit back and said, this is something that I got to see that's unique that a lot of parents don't get to see?
Without question, and I'm glad you brought that up, that I seeing them interact and the way they would laugh and the stories, they were obsessed, I think, like any boys are, about the freedom of running around everywhere to do whatever they want, and like going into the showers, and like it was and when I say that in a way of like they've never had that type of freedom where they're just, hey, let's just make it. But all the showers in Cooperstown are water park, and they made it a water park in there, and I was like, oh my god, you guys are maniacs, right? They're 11 and 12-year-old boys, and you're just coming out and you're like, this is ridiculous, and you just realize that this is the greatest thing for them. Because not so much it's the water park, it's the freedom of, we have no rules right now. Let's just have fun. Hey, I'm going to go down. I'm going to watch these kids that we just met in the barracks next to us, and we want to watch them play. Go ahead. We'll see you later on. It's that freedom that I think all of us had growing up that we don't have anymore, right? When I'm going to go down the neighborhood and I'll be back, at dinner time. We don't have that anymore as a society. And I saw that my kids could have that and run around in Cooperstown and be like, all right, just don't get in trouble. Come back. All right. And they came back. They made a whole bunch of friends. I remember this too, driving back, because it was literally the last time. So my 11-year-old played up, and he played with my 13-year-old. So he played on my 11-year-old pretty decent, and he played with these 13-year-old boys, these 12, 13-year-old boys, and he had a blast. And I told my wife, it's probably the last time we see them play together unless they want to do this in high school. And I was so wiped out after it was our second year doing Cooperstown, and I'm driving back, and I told my wife, no more. We're done. I'm not doing this. I can't do this. I'm so exhausted. Football's right around the corner. The season's about to start. My craziness comes up, and then literally, lo and behold, the next day I was on the phone with multiple parents, and I'm putting together another team. And my wife was like, "Are you crazy?" I said, "But babe, this is exactly how you talk about having kids. You forget the labor. You forget it." I was like, "I've already forgotten it. It's important that my 11-year-old, who's going to be turning 12, has this final experience with all his friends, and we'll never do it again." And she's like, "You're absolutely out of your mind." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am, but this is what it's all about, because who knows how you get these opportunities when they get to high school."
And yet, with all the time traveling and all the time with the kids, you still found time to use your platform to make a difference. And you were the MC at the Dick Vitale Gala. Talk to us as somebody who grew up calling games in the basement, as you told us, that you get to be the guy emceeing the gala for Dickie V and the V Foundation to raise money.
Dick's a close personal friend. Before I came to ESPN, I lived in Sarasota, and that's where Dick lives. And so as the local sports guy, Dick and I'd see Dick at every single event, and him and I would talk. We had a great relationship. So 2006, when I was called up for an audition at ESPN, and I'm competing with 7 other anchors for a job, I called Dick, and I called a couple of other guys that I knew that worked at ESPN. I just said, "Hey, I'm putting you down as a reference. If they call you, could you just say some kind words?" And Dick to this day, he talks about how he was the reason why I got a job at ESPN. And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Yep, you're right, Dick." Because apparently, when they called him, he basically told the talent evaluators, "If you don't hire him, it'll be the biggest mistake of your career. You have no idea how good this guy is and local. I watch him every day. Trust me." So Dick and I have a lot of fun with that comment. And the late, great John Saunders was a dear friend. John and Dick were the ones that created this Dick Vitale event. And I was a reporter sports anchor in that market of Sarasota at the first one. And that was in his backyard where he invited, a bunch of coaches. Like I remember like some of the great college basketball coaches were at this event in his backyard. It's 2005, and I'm a nobody in Sarasota covering this event. And now, when John passed away in 2016, Dick asked me right then and there, when I saw him the next time, he's like, I want you to carry the tradition. I want you to host it. I want you to do what John did. And you can't say no to Dick Vitale. So to be coming up on a decade of hosting it and seeing the lives change. I mean, think about this. Dick and Lorraine Vitale have raised over $100 million for pediatric cancer research in the last 21 years because of this gala. I mean, over $100 million. The V Foundation in its existence has raised over $400 million. A quarter of that is coming from this Dick Vitale Gala.
It's amazing.
So to be associated with it, it is an incredible night. Over 1,000 people are in this room. The emotional roller coaster of 4 hours of hearing families go through stuff and cheering on kids who have overcome cancer, but also sharing stories of kids who've lost their lives and having their parents up there and talking about how every dollar counts while you have celebrities from all over the country come in. It is such an honor. And I've always said this, the man's in, I've lost count. I think it's a 16 Hall of Fames now. This will be his lasting legacy, him and his wife, Dick and Lorraine. This will be their legacy for years and decades past where we are now because of what they've done.
Well, look, we love watching your rise and everything that you do. We love more that you've never forgotten where you've come from. And we love even more that you give us a little time to talk about it every once in a while. So Kevin Negandhi, thank you for always making some time for us. And we'll talk to you soon, as Jeff has one more thing.
As Kevin from Phoenixville, I'm going to give you some hope. Pitchers and catchers report in less than 4 weeks.
There you go.
Fingers crossed. We'll see how this Bo Bichette thing plays out. JT Realmuto. Fingers crossed. I love that. We're looking at the positive in palm trees.
Well, not only that, you'll get to see Christopher Sanchez next week at the Sports Writers Award.
There you go.
Yeah, and Topper, right?
And Topper.
That's right.
I look forward to that.
Thank you, Kevin. We appreciate it, man.
Fellas, be good. Thank you for having me.